if you are running a de-Googled phone or a custom ROM, you can literally fail Google's Are You Human check because now there is a component of the check that can require you to have to use Google Play services to actually pass it. If you think this is an isolated thing, it's really not. It's the latest in a pattern that's getting harder to brush off from Google, and after watching this play out the last year, I don't think Google can claim innocence anymore. So I want to share what's going on, the pattern that has happened in the last year, and where I think the future is headed for mobile operating systems. So just a couple days ago on May 7th, there was this article that was written about Google's next generation reCAPTCHA, and it's called Google Cloud Fraud Defense, which Google formally announced in April 23 of 2026. So this is all quite recent stuff. So what this does, for those of you who don't know, you access a website and they ask, oh, are you a human? It's a way to verify you're not just trying to like use bots. But this new one now relies more on mobile verification. So now it's going to scan to verify you're human, and you need to get your phone and scan this and then verify through your phone. The catch here is that you have to have Google Play Services version 25.41.30 or higher installed in order to actually do this on your phone. So you can do this on iOS or Android, but it needs to be supported on your device. This is already quite concerning, especially when you combine this with things that we've been discussing on the channel, like having to require age verification done on the operating system level, which means now your device is age verified, which now means that's what Google's going to help rely on to help verify this kind of stuff on your computer. It also puts more dependence on mobile devices that not everybody has access to. And of course, if you're a custom ROM user, this is quite concerning. But, I could see someone here saying, if you only look at this story, it's pretty narrow. Maybe they're going to figure out a workaround anyway. But I think when we zoom out, the story becomes a little harder to deny. You see, August of last year, Google came forward and said that we want to announce this developer verification process for all apps on Android devices, right? So what this actually requires is developers who are developing your apps have to upload their government ID, pay a $25 fee, have a verified device, register package names, and have proof of signing keys and all of this stuff, all to Google, even if they want to publish their apps away from the Play Store. Google wants full control of that process now. This would literally kill f-droid. It would kill things like Aurora Store, Optanium, direct APK downloads, etc. Anything sideloaded would be dramatically hit by this. Keepandroidopen.org has been doing amazing coverage. We've been doing coverage for it here and pretty much just relaying stuff that they're doing. They even put out an open letter that we signed back here as well. Google's heard some of that feedback, and now they're doing this advanced flow, which is like this 10-step process for people to just install whatever app they want to install on their device. Now, if you're on a custom ROM, sure, you get to avoid these Google Play services. That is actually where this takes form. But how many developers are going to want to just, keep pushing out updates when a majority of Android users can't access them? It's hard to know. This is a huge hit to the Android ecosystem, and there's no denying that, even if individually you might be able to find a workaround for this stuff. But that's not even it, because early in 2025, Google pretty much decided, so, Android is based on the Android open source project AOSP, and typically it's an open source project developed in the open, but they made the main branch of AOSP locked. And it's read-only now. So now public developers have to sync from Android latest release, which gets periodic stable drops instead of real-time visibility. What this means is that custom ROM teams that used to track changes as they happen now have to wait for whatever Google decides to drop. So Google decides things, they have more control over that. There's less accountability, there's less transparency, and this is just more Google. To kind of reiterate this, we now have Google's CAPTCHA service that is used all around the internet, potentially now require you to have a in some ways, KYC device nowadays with age verification in that mix. But either way, it's going to be much harder to do this on a de-Google device. We have this new verification program that is trying to prevent sideloading and allow you to just install whatever app you want to install on your phone. We have their whole AOSP thing that they're trying to do to make the open source aspect of Android a little bit worse. And also, I didn't even reference how they are kind of doing some really weird stuff with how they publish pixel code builds. And this could really hurt open source projects and custom ROMs as well. Each of these seems like a small thing, but when you stack these patterns together from the last year or so, the trajectory is impossible to miss. And in my view, it just can't be denied anymore. This has to, in some way, either be intentional or just no longer a lack of care for the open source community that made Android possible in the first place. Now, I think Google's relationship with the open source community was in some ways always destined to end like this. And I'll touch on that in a second. But I do have a service that is sponsoring this portion of the video that is still friendly to de-Googled operating systems.
This part of the video is sponsored by PROTON, and here's why it matters for what we're covering. We keep talking about these legislative threats like chat control, VPN bans, age verification, breaking encryption, and if you're still using Gmail, iCloud, or Microsoft for everything, you're just one law away from having that access compromised or surveilled. PROTON is here to give you that alternative. It has encrypted email, encrypted cloud storage, an open source VPN that respects your privacy, and they can't read your content because it's end-to-end encrypted. Switching might feel overwhelming, but PROTON even makes that straightforward. Their import tool pulls your Gmail contacts and emails. PROTON Drive works very similar to Google Drive in the web. PROTON Pass migrates your existing passwords, and you can do this all in an afternoon at this point. We use PROTON Mail and PROTON Pass and many other PROTON products back here to run Techlore and even make some of these videos because the threats that we cover aren't just abstract threats. They're real, and moving to services that can't be compromised anywhere near as easily is one of the most effective actions that you can take. Links to PROTON are in the description. Thank you, PROTON, for sponsoring this part of the video. And now let's continue to talk about these threats.
So here's the thing, Android's roots are in open source. So far on mobile, the only way to escape a company and actually have some kind of ownership, if you value open source, if you value independence, has been to go with some kind of de-Googled version of Android. But, you know, Android as the open source project was always kind of a Google thing. And so for the last decade, I've been pointing people towards these because they've been the best option, and Linux devices, in my view, just aren't ready for most people. I know because I have them and I've tried using them. I have every major Linux phone that has ever been debuted back here, and they're just not ready for most people. Now, this is before my time, before I was following technology, but in November 5th, 2007, Google announced the Open Handset Alliance between HTC, Motorola, T-Mobile, Qualcomm, and other 30 companies. So you can read into this stuff. And Android was supposed to be the first truly open and comprehensive platform for mobile devices. The reason why I think they made this open, and what I've heard from other people, is that Apple had just launched the iPhone a few months earlier, and Google didn't have anything. They didn't have hardware. They needed a coalition, and they needed that kind of movement. And openness was actually a recruiting pitch to help them catch up. So openness wasn't even a principle, it was a strategy so that they could eventually catch up with Apple. But I think the community evangelized Android. They fixed bugs in AOSP for free. They built custom ROMs. We had the Nexus devices back in the day that were very developer and ROM friendly. And I think Google really did a good job catering to this audience, and it made Android worth using. But Google's alignments and their positions have shifted. The alignment is breaking, and I think we're getting our first real look at what Google actually wants out of Android, because they don't need the open source world anymore. And that puts me in a really sad place because I don't know what the future looks like. At minimum, this is just plain disrespect. Like, Google would have never gotten Android to the place it is today if it wasn't for the open source community, if it wasn't for the people. These custom ROMs, many of these custom ROMs have contributed code upstream to AOSP to fix bugs, to fix security issues, to fix privacy concerns. And so Google taking this approach is extremely disrespectful to the projects, but also to all the users and all the people who committed to Android to get away from Apple's ecosystem for one reason or another. So this is plain disrespectful, I think. But I think the more, controversial and even cynical take is that I think this is, Google is telling us very loud and very directly that they no longer want to serve this audience. They don't want to serve the OEMs. They don't want to serve the open source developers. They don't want to serve the ROM maintainers. They don't want to serve the people who patched AOSP for free for a decade. They don't want to even serve the users who wanted the openness that Android originally promised them. Even basic things like being able to install apps away from the default app store. On desktop, we have a solution to this, which is Linux. It runs on whatever pretty much hardware you want it to run on. There's no central company that decides what you can do with it, that's steering its direction. Mobile, though, never quite got there. We have Postmarket OS, we have Mobian or Mobian, we have the Pine phone. We have other Linux devices, and they've gotten better over the years, but it's not anywhere near a prominent enough third option to influence the rest of the space yet. So what do I think? Especially if you're on an Android device. I think as of right now, especially if you're on a custom ROM, obviously that's fine for now, but I'm looking at this for the next 10 years, right? So I'm looking at this decades at a time. I think in the next decade of this conversation, is not going to end with Google or Android. And I think there's a real opportunity to either maybe like have a new community run Android open source project that maybe forks AOSP, but now makes it community maintained, or just something that's Linux based from the get-go. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a developer, but these are just ideas that I'm grappling with. I just don't think that it's ever going to be sustainable to have a central company in charge of what's supposed to be open for the community. If you have an Android device right now, I don't think the point of this video is to make you throw it in a lake and be scared or anything. I think these are all still wonderful projects. I still recommend them, right? But I'm just looking at this from a really long-term perspective, and I'm seeing this pattern, and it is quite concerning. I think it would be reckless to not be concerned about this. So make sure you make yourself heard. Check out keepandroidopen.org. It is a phenomenal resource right now. I want to give a huge thank you to Proton for sponsoring this video. If this stuff matters to you, make sure to share it, make people know what's happening out there. So it's not just us nerds who are following this, because if Google does this to Android, then there's no more open ecosystem to hold any company accountable, which impacts everybody's devices. If you like what we're doing, you can become a Techlorian down in the description. We have a fun little Signal group that you can become a part of with some other perks. Other than that, I'll see you all next time on Techlore, and make sure to get involved in this somehow.